They betrayed me, my own sister stole my identity, and my parents helped her do it. I lost everything overnight. But I didn't disappear. I evolved. I got close, played their game, and now I hold their secrets. You won't believe what I did next. My name is Samantha Reyes. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed hard work and integrity would be enough to build a good future. I used to think that the people closest to me, my family, would always have my back. I don't believe that anymore. I was a marine biologist. I had built my career slowly, carefully. I specialized in ocean conservation, spending most of my time studying coastal ecosystems around San Diego, especially the waters off La Jolla. There's a peace in watching sea life move in patterns older than time. I loved my job. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. It mattered to me. Everything changed last spring. It started with a phone call. A hiring manager from a company I had never interviewed with called to confirm some academic details. At first, I was confused. Then he mentioned my new job title, a senior marine policy advisor. I laughed, thinking it was a mistake. I never applied for such a position. But it wasn't a mistake. I found out that someone had submitted an entire application under my name, complete with forged transcripts, letters of recommendation, and even a research portfolio that looked suspiciously like mine. The pieces came together slowly, painfully. The applicant had been hired. And that applicant was my younger sister, Lily. Lily is 5 years younger than me. She's always been more charming, more eager to be seen. She studied environmental science for a while, but she never really stuck with anything. Growing up, people said we were close. But I see it differently now. I see the small cuts, the times she copied my work in school and laughed it off. The way our parents brushed off my concerns because she's still learning. What hurt most wasn't just that Lily stole my identity. It was that she had help. My parents, Carlos and Diane Reyes, good, respectable people in our neighborhood, church-going, friendly, always ready with a smile, they wrote glowing letters on my behalf. Letters I never knew existed. They vouched for me, praised my fieldwork, talked about my awards and ethics. Except, of course, they weren't writing about me. They were writing for Lily. When I confronted them, there was no apology. My mother said it was an opportunity for Lily, that she just needed a foot in the door. My father told me not to be dramatic, that family comes first. I asked them whose family, because it sure as hell didn't feel like I was part of it anymore. The news of the forgery spread faster than I could control it. Word got around my professional circles. My name was quietly removed from several ongoing projects. A conference I was scheduled to speak at asked me to withdraw. Emails stopped coming. Calls went unanswered. Just like that, I was radioactive. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I didn't try to make a scene. I did the only thing I could do at that moment. I disappeared from their world. I stopped responding to texts. I moved out of the apartment I was renting downtown. I found a small place near La Jolla Cove where I could watch the water and try to piece myself back together. I didn't know what would come next. I just knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Days blurred into weeks. I'd sit on the cliffs every morning, watching the waves break against the rocks. Seals barking in the distance. Gulls calling overhead. Sometimes I'd cry, but mostly I just stared. I couldn't understand how the people who raised me could be so quick to erase me. And Lily, she didn't even flinch. She sent me one message. This doesn't have to come between us. As if she hadn't stolen my identity. As if she hadn't burned down everything I'd built just to step into a job she didn't earn. But she had no idea I was still watching. One afternoon I saw a photo online. It was Lily standing in front of her office building, smiling with her new team. Her badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. It had my name on it. That image stayed with me. It didn't make me angry. Not right away. It made me focused. I began reading everything I could about the company she worked for, Pacific Ecodynamics. It sounded clean, green, and professional on the surface. But I knew how these companies worked behind the scenes. Not all of them were as ethical as their marketing claimed, and if there was anything buried, I would find it. Still, I couldn't just walk in. I needed a way in. So I started showing up to industry mixers and networking events again, slowly, quietly. I kept my head down. I used my middle name, Marie, when introducing myself. And that's where I met Morgan Blake. Morgan was in her late 40s, sharply dressed, confident, and kind in a way that made people lean in. She was an executive at Pacific Ecodynamics, Lily's direct superior. She remembered me vaguely from an old joint research panel. I played it carefully, just enough familiarity to stay relevant, just enough distance to avoid suspicion. "I thought you were working on that coral restoration project," she said over wine at a rooftop mixer. "Oh, it didn't work out," I replied with a soft smile. "But I'm still keeping busy." She offered to connect me with some people, maybe even tour their facility. I nodded politely. Inside, I already knew. This was the opening. I didn't tell her who I was. I didn't tell her that the woman working under her had stolen everything from me. I just listened, asked questions, learned names, took mental notes. It's strange how quickly people trust you when you seem harmless. Back at home, I dug deeper. I began noticing odd things. Lily used to leave her laptop open during video calls when she visited our parents. I remembered her passwords. She hadn't changed them since college. One night, I tried logging into her work account. To my surprise, it worked. At first, I just looked, downloaded a few documents. Nothing illegal, nothing useful. But then I found a folder marked internal only. Inside were files, reports, emails, attachments. Things I didn't fully understand yet, but enough to know this wasn't just about me anymore. Something about that company wasn't right, and I was going to prove it. Not for revenge. Not yet. This was about the truth. About justice. About taking back my name. Even if I had to do it in silence. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but something inside me knew I'd find it. The deeper I dug into those internal folders, the more questions I had. There were progress reports that didn't line up with public statements. Memos about hazardous waste disposal signed off with vague language. And then, a file that made my stomach turn, photos of offshore dumping with timestamps and GPS coordinates. Pacific Ecodynamics had been claiming a zero-impact environmental model to donors and the public. But those images told a very different story. Each file I uncovered felt like peeling back a rotten layer of skin. I wasn't just dealing with a stolen identity anymore. I was looking at a system built on lies. And my sister, Lily, was right in the middle of it, flashing my name on her badge, pretending she earned her seat at the table. The same name attached to those documents now. For a while, I didn't know what to do. I'd sit at my kitchen table, files spread around me, the sound of the waves crashing just beyond the window. I was scared. If I exposed this, I knew it wouldn't be clean. It wouldn't just ruin Lily. It would drag down Morgan, the company, maybe even people I hadn't met yet. But then again, hadn't they all built their success on lies? There was one moment that pushed me over the edge. I saw an internal email where Lily, using my name, was credited for developing a marine waste reduction strategy. That strategy? It was mine, word for word, lifted from a paper I'd written 2 years earlier and never published because I was waiting for the right partner organization. She had submitted it like it was hers, and they praised her for it. Morgan even wrote, "This is the kind of initiative that gives us our edge." That was it. I couldn't sit quietly anymore. I started by copying everything. Reports, email threads, photos, scanned meeting notes. I created encrypted folders and stored them across multiple backup drives. I didn't want any trail leading back to me, not yet. I began organizing it all into timelines, creating connections between dates and events, the way I used to build data maps in my research work. The structure helped. It gave me control in a situation that had stolen so much from me. Still, I knew I couldn't just drop everything online. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed the story to be airtight, credible. I started contacting anonymous tip lines through secure browsers, environmental watchdog groups, investigative journalists, even a few federal agencies that monitored eco-violations. I never gave my name. I just sent the documents with clear subject lines. Whistleblower evidence, Pacific Ecodynamics. The responses started slowly. First, automated replies, then requests for more information. Eventually, a journalist reached out through a secure portal, asking for a phone call. I declined. I wasn't ready to let anyone hear my voice yet, but I gave them what they needed. Piece by piece, I fed them the truth, and I made sure every file was traceable back to Lily's account. That part, it wasn't easy. There were nights I sat on my bed with the screen glowing in front of me, wondering if I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. This was my sister. My blood. There were memories of us laughing in the back seat on family road trips, of her sneaking into my room when she was scared of thunderstorms. But those memories felt like someone else's life now. That version of Lily didn't exist anymore, not for me. And my parents? They had stopped calling after I moved out. No check-ins. No apologies. The silence between us grew thicker with each passing week. I think they knew what was coming, even if they couldn't admit it out loud. Then, one morning, the first headline hit the local news. Environmental giant under fire for alleged offshore dumping. They didn't name names yet, but the article referenced internal documents and anonymous sources. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words looked strange, like they weren't real. But I had written them. Well, not the article itself, but the story behind it. The proof. The evidence. It felt heavy. Not satisfying. Not yet. Morgan called an emergency staff meeting that week. I knew because Lily posted a filtered photo of her coffee on Instagram with a caption, "Nothing like damage control at 8 a.m." That's how I knew they were spiraling. A few days later, more articles surfaced. Then came legal notices. Regulatory bodies launched formal inquiries. Pacific Ecodynamics issued a public statement denying the allegations, calling them grossly misrepresented. But the tide was turning. And Lily? She started unraveling. I watched her from a distance, mostly through online posts and what little our mutual acquaintances shared. She looked tired. The smile in her eyes had faded. There was a new tightness around her mouth in photos. Then came the layoffs. Several departments downsized for restructuring purposes. I saw Lily's name in an industry forum, listed among those suspended pending investigation. I should have felt something by then: joy, relief, even revenge. But what I felt was silence. Not emptiness, but quiet satisfaction. Like watching a storm roll in after months of dry heat. One night, I got a voicemail from my mother. I hadn't heard her voice in months. "Sam, I don't know what's going on exactly, but things are bad here. Lily's in trouble. They think we just need to talk. Please. Call me." I didn't return the call. Then my father reached out. Same message, different tone. His was sharper, more defensive. "If you know something, you should come clean. We're family. You don't turn your back on family." I let that one sit in my inbox, unopened. It was like they only remembered I existed when their ship started sinking. Where were they when mine went down? The news grew louder. Pacific Ecodynamics officially became the target of a federal investigation. Executives were being questioned. Environmental damage reports surfaced with verified data. The scandal exploded into a national conversation about accountability in environmental industries. And through it all, I stayed invisible. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post online. I didn't reach out to anyone from my old world. I spent most days near the ocean, letting the salt air fill my lungs, watching waves crash over the same rocks I'd stared at for weeks when my world first fell apart. But I wasn't broken anymore. I was building something in silence, piece by piece. And they had no idea it was me. By the time the investigations were fully underway, I had become a ghost in my own life. I watched the world unfold without ever stepping into it. My name was still buried beneath Lily's, still smeared by association in the industry. But behind the scenes, I had already taken back more than anyone knew. Morgan Blake, the woman who unknowingly let me in, tried to stay above water. She released public statements, conducted damage control interviews, and even claimed she had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But I remembered how easily she had praised my work, how quickly she accepted credentials without real verification. She had bought the lie because it was convenient, because Lily was charming and wore confidence like perfume. And now it was burning down around her. I heard through one of the reports that Morgan had been put on leave. They were calling it a neutral suspension. Internally, that usually means we're figuring out who to blame first. Lily, on the other hand, was cracking. The company had traced the data leaks back to her account. The files I had sent out were all watermarked with her login. I made sure of that. I had been careful, meticulous, really. I never accessed her account from my home Wi-Fi or anywhere connected to me. I used public networks, VPNs, secure drives. It was surgical. Still, I felt a strange hollowness seeing her face in the news, her eyes blurred in an image they captioned, "Employee under internal review." She looked pale. Lost. Not the smug girl who stole my identity and called it a favor. I read a quote from her in one article. "I never touched those files. Someone must have used my credentials." I had to admit, she wasn't wrong. I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't feel guilty either. She had lit the fire when she stole my life. I just redirected the flames. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, I went to the cliffs, the place I had gone every day since everything fell apart. I sat with my feet dangling over the edge, eyes on the endless blue. I liked the quiet there. The sea never asked questions. It just kept moving. My phone buzzed with a text. From Lily. "I need to talk. Please." It was the first time she'd reached out directly in months. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I almost deleted the message, but something made me pause. I replied with one word. "Where?" We met at a coffee shop not far from where I used to work. She walked in like a shadow of herself, hair in a loose bun, no makeup, sunglasses clutched tightly in one hand even though it was cloudy outside. She sat across from me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "They think I did it. They're saying I leaked the files. That I accessed things I shouldn't have. You know I didn't, right?" I tilted my head slightly, watching her carefully. "Didn't you?" Her eyes widened. "Sam, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you shouldn't have used someone else's name to build your life," I said, voice steady. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She just stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You stole everything from me," I continued. "And our parents helped you. You didn't even hesitate. And now you're shocked that it's falling apart?" "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did." Silence stretched between us. Then she asked, softer this time, "Was it you?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Her hand trembled as she picked up her coffee. She didn't drink it. She just held it like it might anchor her. "If you were trying to destroy me, you did a great job." "I wasn't trying to destroy you," I said. "I was trying to take my life back." She didn't reply. And I didn't stay long after that. I got up, nodded once, and walked out without another word. A few days later, my parents showed up at my door. I didn't open it. I watched through the peephole as they stood outside, unsure whether to knock again or leave. My mother called out my name once, softly. My father said something about just wanting to talk. I didn't answer. I let them stand in that silence, the same silence they gave me when I needed them. That week, the company officially collapsed. Lawsuits were filed. Executives stepped down. Employees were released. The damage couldn't be undone. They had built a future on fraud, and now it had all sunk. I wasn't proud of how it happened, but I wasn't ashamed either. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with flashing lights or loud victories. Sometimes it comes quietly, patiently, in the shape of a woman sitting alone by the ocean, building her own version of the truth. And I wasn't done yet. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when a storm finally passes. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind where everything feels still, like the moment just after lightning. That's what it felt like the week after Pacific Ecodynamics fell apart. News stories began to slow. The headlines shifted to newer scandals. People moved on. But I didn't. I stayed in the quiet. The investigations had wrapped most of their initial reports. Multiple executives were facing charges. Environmental regulators had launched separate cases to assess the damage caused by illegal offshore dumping. Community leaders who once praised the company now distanced themselves. And Lily, She disappeared from the public eye altogether. I never heard from her again after our last conversation. I don't know where she went. Maybe she moved away. Maybe she stayed in the same city, hiding behind a new name like she once hid behind mine. I didn't care to follow. She had taken something precious from me. And even though I'd reclaimed the truth, the pieces didn't fit the same way anymore. My parents stopped trying after their visit to my door. I guess they understood there was no fixing what they'd done. You can't rebuild trust when the foundation was made of lies. They had chosen Lily. They had called it helping. I called it betrayal. And once the weight of it all came crashing down, they turned desperate, not remorseful. That mattered. I'd spent most of my life trying to make them proud. Getting scholarships, writing long research reports, staying late at labs, presenting clean results. And when I finally needed them to stand by me, they handed my name to someone else like it meant nothing. That kind of wound doesn't heal with apologies. In the weeks that followed, I was offered interviews by journalists. One publication even asked if I wanted to come forward as the silent whistleblower. I declined all of them. This was never about fame or recognition. It was about setting the record straight, even if I had to do it in the shadows. A former colleague, one of the few who never turned their back on me, emailed saying, "Whatever happened, thank you. You saved lives." I didn't reply, but I saved that message. I read it more times than I can count. Not because I needed praise, but because I needed to remember why I started all of this in the first place. People always think revenge is loud, explosive,
Dramatic.
but mine wasn't. It was slow, intentional,
Silent.
Some evenings I still go to the cliffs at La Jolla. I sit alone with my legs folded beneath me, watching the tide roll in. The wind there always feels like it knows my story. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't judge. It just moves around me, steady and sure. That's how I feel now, steady and sure. No one in the industry reached out with job offers. My name was still tangled in the mess. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, not technically. People like things simple, clean. I was neither. But that was okay. I had already started rebuilding my life. Quietly. Away from the headlines. A small research collective in Baja had offered me a volunteer position. It wasn't paid, but it was real work, real purpose. And for the first time in months, I felt useful again. I took it. I packed my bags. Sold or donated most of what I owned. I kept only what mattered. My journals, my research logs, a folder of oceanic data, and a few family photographs I couldn't quite throw away, even if the faces in them felt like strangers now. Before I left San Diego, I stood one last time at the edge of the cliff, the place that had been my quiet witness through it all. I looked out over the water and let the wind carry away everything I didn't need anymore. I didn't cry. Not at first. But when I closed my eyes and heard the waves below, I felt something loosen in my chest. A knot I'd been holding for too long. The tears came, not out of guilt, not out of sorrow, but out of release. Because I had survived. They had stolen my future. They'd torn down everything I had built with their lies and excuses. But I had taken it back.
Piece by piece.
In silence. With no one beside me but the ocean. And now I am free.